Hey everybody, my name is Brad. I'm one of the pastors here, and if I haven't a chance to meet you or you're memory impaired, glad to introduce myself to you. I'm going to be out in the plaza area afterwards, and if you are new, I'd so much like to meet you. To our church family at home or up on the rim in your RV or a resort someplace or around the world, maybe you're in your living room, family room, safe room. I don't know where you are, but we miss you. And we think of you as just an extension of our church family here. And though we're not in the same airspace, you're very much a part of our family. We think of you, we pray for you, and we're glad that you join us this weekend. Before I begin with some thoughts that I have prepared this week, I want to invite you to something this Wednesday evening here on our campus or at home. We're going to do what we do once or twice a year called a town hall meeting. Now, we typically do that early in the year, and so much has happened in our life of our church family over the last 7 months or so. We want to give you an update where we're at, and it's just challenging to do that at our weekend gatherings like this. So, this Wednesday evening from 7 to 8:30, if you want to come here on campus, we'll also have it available online, streaming live. We want to bring you an update on some staff changes that we've had, and we want to give you a financial update for our church family, and kind of what the fall looks like into next year. So if that's of interest to you, look for a note this next week by Facebook or email of the link of how to get to that online experience or that streaming experience. And we hope you'll join us on Wednesday. It's interactive, so you'll have a chance to ask questions or offer some comments. And it's really, we're trying very much to communicate in this kind of new environment. All right, so having said that, also a couple of times a year, we take a weekend to talk about what the church is all about, why that's significant, why it matters, the why of what the church is. So let me start here with this. In 2009, a cultural anthropologist, that's what he likes to be called, by the name of Simon Sinek, wrote a book called Start With Why. And he did a TED Talk, a 20-minute TED Talk. It's actually worth watching if you want. It is the most watched TED Talk in their history. And he observed something with it, and he introduced us to something called the golden circle. They're going to put it up here on the screen, and you're going to see what the golden circle is. He noticed something as, go one back, go back to Simon, there you go, right there. He noticed something as he was doing his research in corporate anthropology and the culture of corporations, and it was this, that most of the corporations and organizations beyond corporations, medical research facilities and other organizations, most of the leadership could give you what their what was and how they did their what. But he discovered that the organizations that were thriving and had the longest successful lifespan were organizations that didn't talk about what their what and their how was. They knew clearly what their why was. And that's what they talked about because their why informed what their what and their how was. So that got us thinking about a decade or so ago, and we wondered, well, what do we talk about when we talk about our church family? And so we put together our own golden circle, which is this one. And it's got a very key component that's added that Simon Sinek didn't think about. He's a really smart guy, but he didn't get this one right. What we added is the center spot, which is who. We have the why, and it informs what, and that leads to how we respond, but it is the who at the center for the church that is the difference maker. You don't have the who right, and this who is not at the center of what the church is about. You actually have a dysfunctional church that isn't what Jesus had in mind because he's the who, and he gets to determine what that who is or who that who is. Are you with me still, or have I lost you already? Okay, let's look at this a little more carefully. So when John, Jesus' friend, eyewitness to Jesus' life, wants to tell the world about Jesus' story, he starts with this. In John chapter 1, verse 10, it says, God came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. So the God became human and made his home among us and was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. Everything, absolutely everything about the church emanates from God coming into this world as Jesus, living among us. And we read from this and we know that by and large, the vast majority of people who actually saw him rejected him. Even people who had been told that he was coming didn't recognize him for who he was. And so they missed out on something called spiritual rebirth. You know how you get into the church? You're born into it. And I don't mean because mom and dad. I mean because there's a spiritual rebirth that happens, and that gets you into the church, because the church is the expression of Christ here on earth. And this all happens by faith, by God's good grace to us through Jesus Christ. That's how we're born spiritually. And this is the who of what the church is about. You see, if you miss the who, you miss it all. And that's where we start as a church. The church is a who for sure, but it's the who that informs our why. And this is what Jesus tells us is his why. He actually tells us a number of places what his why is, but here's one from Matthew 5:17. It says, "Don't misunderstand why I have come," Jesus says. "I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose." Well, what in all the world does that mean? It means that a long, long time ago, God used other ways to help the world reorient itself to himself. He wanted to convince the world, the people that he had made, that he wanted to do life with them. He wanted to be part of their every experience in life and to do life with him, to experience the wonder of who he was, the goodness of who he was. And so when the world got that wrong, he said, I'm going to find someone who can communicate it. I'm going to spill my wonder through him into this world. His name was Abraham, and a little later it was Moses. And out of his connection with Moses, he wrote some promises out. He wrote some ways that people could really do life well with God. Like the 10 Commandments, the bar was actually pretty low, and we found a way to get under that. But they're basic kinds of things of what life with him, because he wants to do life with us. And he would say that didn't work out the way that it was supposed to work out. And so people weren't able to accomplish that on their own, though they really tried. So he comes into the world now in his son, Jesus Christ, and says, I'm going to fulfill what you couldn't do. I'm going to make it possible for you by infilling you with myself, my spirit, so you'll now be able to do that if you want that. It's your choice, but if you want to do all of life with me like I want to do all of life with you, it's your choice. And Jesus is the only way to have that. And it cost him a lot to offer that up to you. I want to do all of life with you, because I know that when I do life with you and you do life with me, it's going to affect how you see the world. It's going to affect how you live in this world. And you're ultimately, in some ways, going to begin to look like me because you think increasingly like me. And the world's going to believe it. And they're going to be attracted, and they'll give me the opportunity to do in them what I've done in you. That's the why. He repeatedly states his why in different ways, but it's really the same idea. He says, I've come to serve, I've come to save, I've come to turn darkness into light. And then, as if to summarize all that his why is and why he came, in Matthew 6:10, in his most famous prayer, he writes this, May your kingdom come, talking to his Father. May your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, I came into this world so that what God intended all along and what he's worked at for thousands of years would be fulfilled. And that is that the things on earth would work like they work in heaven. That heaven and how it functions and how we do life with God there would actually become a reality here and now. I love this saying from one of my author mentors. If you want to go to heaven, go now. Because Jesus invites heaven to come here, and that's his dream.
that we would do life with him in a way that resembles what life is going to be like there. So we have stated it this way. That's our who and that's our why, but our mission is taken out of that context. This is how we state our mission. We want to help people increasingly be with Jesus so that they increasingly think like Jesus, so they're increasingly mistaken for him. That's really what God had in mind. Jesus came into this world to make that possible for us. And that's what we want to be about in every way. Everything that we do, we want to help one another increasingly do all of life with Jesus, all of it, every moment of it. And we believe this, that as we do more and more life with Jesus, we actually think like him increasingly as well. How can that not happen? And then the more we think like him, without even really trying, his motives overtake us and we begin to do what he did and act like he acted, not to try to mimic him, but our value system, our core motivation system is actually changed by spending all of life with him. There's a who and there's a why, and then it seems that Jesus in his leadership of the church says, but the church is an expression in all different cultures and all different places. There's actually a local expression, and each local community has to kind of figure out the what. How do they live that out? How do they live out who their who is and what their why is? And that may be personalized, that may be different for each church around the world, depending on what's in their culture and who they are. And so this is what we've been thinking about for 20-some years that we've been around. What does that look like for us? It may not look like what anybody else does, but first of all, it has to be centered on Jesus, and it has to be clear that we fulfill the why that he has for us. So, a few years ago, this came into focus a little bit through an encounter that we read about. That's a common passage of Scripture, but it just took on its own life for us as a leadership team, and we began to talk about it, and it seemed to connect with other people in our church family, and this kind of became a rallying cry for us as we figured out, so what are we going to do to live out who and why where the church actually exists? The story comes from John chapter 4, and here's the scene. In verse 3 we said, that's Jesus, left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from a long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." Now this was an unexpected switch because Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. He was a male, and she was a Samaritan. She was a female, and we're going to find out she came from kind of a questionable, it appears, or dysfunctional relationship kind of background. It just wouldn't be a natural thing for these two to kind of connect. Not just that, by Jesus communicating with her, he had broken some ethnic, racial, and religious taboos, but this is what Jesus does, right? In verse 9 it says, the woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You're a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus has something up for her. Jesus replies, "If you only knew the gift God has for you," it's a little mysterious, "and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you this living water." It's a new term. She wants some of that water, doesn't understand exactly what it is. Jesus replies, he says, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." And this leads to a discussion as to whether the Samaritans are like the legitimate people of God or whether the Jewish people are. And it's a really interesting conversation that Jesus and her have. And then the discussion turns to her personal life. In fact, Jesus brings it up. And at first glance, it's kind of insensitive for him to do that. He asks her about some things that are disappointing for her in her world and her life. Like, for example, she says, something, or Jesus points it out to her, you've had 5 husbands, and the guy you're living with right now isn't your husband. Now, we don't know, did she have 5 failed marriages? Did 5 guys that she married die? That's a little suspicious right there, right? don't know the story, but can you imagine the sorrow and the sadness, whether it's grief or dysfunction or whatever it is? She's in a really bad place. Speculation would generally be that these were marriages that fail. Now, the fact that Jesus brings it up, you'd think, well, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Well, not really. Because it appears that the way Jesus does it, he doesn't do it in a condemning or mocking way, but he kind of speaks to her sadness and the reality of the disappointment of her own life. But he does it with grace and mercy. I wonder, as I read this story, if any man had ever spoken to her with the compassion and kindness and love and grace and mercy that Jesus spoke to her with. Well, whatever happened in that conversation, it appears to kind of melt her heart. And she becomes convinced that Jesus is unlike anyone else she's ever met. And then she's able to put the pieces together. In verse 25, it says, the woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us, kind of like what you just did. And then Jesus says this, I am the Messiah. And apparently this is all it took for her to put all those pieces together. And verse 28 says, the woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So the people came streaming from the village to see him. And a little later in the story, we see this happen in verse 39. It says, many of the Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus. Why? Well, because the woman had said, he told me everything I ever did. Apparently she ran back to the village and she told them what she had encountered with Jesus. When they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Then they said to the woman, now we believe not because of what you told us, but because we have heard him ourselves. Now we know that he is indeed the Savior of the world. And here's what gripped us in this story was this. This well that they met at had probably been there someplace, maybe even as long as 2,000 years, but many hundreds of years this well had been there, and it had produced what wells produce, which is very good, excellent. Of course it produced water. It had produced water for people to cook with all those centuries. It provided water for crops. It provided water for livestock. It provided life, really, in a desert climate for their whole family. And this is what it did. And so she comes to Jesus. She's looking for water. And it's an amazing experience that she has with Jesus because by virtue of his presence, he turns that water into a spiritual encounter with him because he simply took interest, noticed her, and took interest in her. And she not only walks away with water, she walks away with living water, which is synonymous with new spiritual life in her life. It's an amazing story how Jesus, by his presence and by taking notice and taking interest, this desperate woman has a profound change in her life. And so does a whole town. It's an incredible story. So we began to ask 10 or 12 years ago what it would look like in our community to be that kind of a well, a physical place that would meet the real needs of families around us. And while it met their need, it would also be a way that we could reflect and represent the love and grace of Jesus in a way that their lives would be impacted, and they in turn would be used to impact a whole community, maybe a whole city. And so we began to think, what would this look like? How would this happen? For me, that question had begun to be asked. It's actually a troubling question for me. It had been asked some 30 years earlier for me. Not around this particular story, but around a dream. Like not a Martin Luther King, like I have a dream kind of dream, but like a sleep dream. I'm asleep. And yet it turned out to be, for me, I had a dream. I have a dream kind of moment. I'll tell you what it is. It's a simple dream. I've shared it with our church family before. It still marks my life today. It's a dream of a dad and his maybe 5 or 6 year old son. They've gone to the local corner store to pick up some bread, and it's 30 years ago, so a newspaper, remember those? A newspaper, and some milk. And they're walking back home, and they walk past this church. Little boy's got his hand in his dad's hand, and it's a picture postcard setting. It's a white church with a steeple, Windows are open, there's music coming out, hymns are coming out of the window. It's 30 years ago, right? The grass has been cut, the flowers are out, the trees have been trimmed, the parking lot is full. There's this beautiful all-American family walking up with, husband, wife, like, Ken and Barbie, and two beautiful, perfect little children. They're walking into this church, and it's a beautiful scene, right? And this little boy looks at it, and he tugs on his dad's hand, and he says, "Dad, what goes on in that building?" And the dad just ignores his son. It's not an important question to him, but the little boy's persistent, so he tugs on his dad's hand again, and he says, "Dad, what goes on in that building?" And the dad kind of half-heartedly goes, something? I think it's kind of like the club I'm part of, that we get together on Thursday. We get together, we have a meal together, we sing the national anthem, Pledge of Allegiance. Some guy gets up and talks for a little while. Then we hang out for a little while, and I go back to work, and then the next Thursday, come back and do the whole thing over again. It's a club. It's a club you belong to. And I woke up. I can still remember now, as I tell you, turning to my left and seeing my alarm clock with the 3-inch red letters read 4:17 in the morning. And I had this conversation with myself because it disturbed me. You see, that white church, idealistic church, that was church I was a pastor at. It was my church. And I couldn't understand why that dad had not knelt down in front of his little son and said, "Oh my goodness, you have asked such an important question. That is the most important gathering of people in our entire community." See, I got to explain it to you this way, son. If you ever get to school and you realize you left your lunch at home and you don't know what you're going to have for lunch and you're embarrassed to tell the rest of the kids that you forgot your lunch, you don't worry about it. Leave like you're going to go home, but go to the church because they got people there that'll make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they'll take care of you, and they'll make sure that you get back for your class right after lunch. But not just when you're a little boy, when you're an adult and you can't make ends meet and you don't have enough to feed your family. And it's not your fault you lost your job. It's just tough. You go through those seasons. You don't go anywhere else in the community. You go right to the church because they're going to look after you. They're going to provide for you. They're not going to ask you a bunch of embarrassing questions. They're just going to come alongside you and they're going to help you. That's what they're going to do. And son, if you ever fall off your bike in the neighborhood and you skin your knee and there's nobody around to help you, you go right to the church. That's what they have people there who will clean up the scrape, and they'll put some ointment on it, a Band-Aid on it, and they'll send you back on your way again. But not just when you're a little kid. When you're an adult, and it's your heart that's broken, and a marriage that you had such a great dream for falls apart, and your health fails, and it's just a hurtful season in your life. You don't have to go anywhere else. You go right to the church. Because they have people there who love you and have been through their own hurt, and they're going to help you. They'll put ointment on it. They'll bandage it up. May not be able to heal it, but boy, they will love you, and they will care for you in a real practical kind of way. And son, if you're ever out in the community and you lose your way, you can't find your way back home, you're on your bike and you just get doing stuff and you lose your way, don't worry about it. You go right to the church. They know everybody in this community. They know where everybody lives. And they know you, and they know where your home is, and they will help you get back to your home. And not just when you're a little boy, when you're an adult and you just lost your way, and you don't know where to go next. And life is chaotic, and it's a catastrophe, and it's messed up, and you just don't know what to do. You're just lost. They're going to help you. They'll walk beside you. They'll get you back home. And here, son, the most important thing is they're going to introduce you to the man who taught them how to do all of that. Because every one of them has been hungry and broken and lost. His name is Jesus. And he healed them, and he helped them, and he found them, because that's who he is. And so, son, that's why that group of people who know and love Jesus and have experienced life without him and life with him, they're the experts of what you need, and they'll give up everything they have to show and demonstrate and live the life of Christ with you. I spent the next 3 hours pleading with Jesus that he would let me be part of a community of people like that. who would lay all their stuff down for the sake of the good news of who Jesus is, and they would go out into our community and they would live it. Absolutely live it in real and honest and authentic ways. And that might just earn the right for someone to go, what's with you? Where do you find your hope? Where do you find joy? Who found you? And that's what we would become as a church family. So, 23 years ago, my family and myself arrived in Phoenix. We didn't know anybody, but we had a dream of seeing if that kind of community could be formed someplace in the world. And after about a month of doing what we could to meet people and neighbors and so on, we weren't meeting very many people. And so we decided to do a really bad thing, like a really bad idea. We still don't know why we did it. But what we decided to do is we needed to meet our neighbors. And so for that hot summer, our first summer at 115, we went and knocked on the doors of 600 of our neighbors' homes with a simple question. I remember the Friday nights we would go out and we kind of split our community up into, about 120, 150 homes, and we prayed for every single home that we went past. If there was kids' furniture out front, we assumed there were children. And so we prayed a blessing on this family with children, that they would raise really wonderful kids, and God would somehow become centered to them. And there was an air conditioning van out front. We assumed person owned an air conditioning company or worked for an air conditioning company. We would pray blessings on air conditioning companies, because boy did we need it at 115 degrees. We went door to door. Next day we'd get up, go door to door, and stand across from the island in our kitchen and cry, like actual tears, because we didn't want to do this. It's not our personality, and we didn't want to be associated with people who did that kind of thing. But we did it. And we asked people this question. We said, we're starting a new church in the area. Are you part of a church? And if they said, yep, we said, what do you love about your church? And they told us some things, no real surprises. But lots of people, probably more than 50%, said they didn't go to church anywhere. And we asked them, not why don't you go to church, why do you think people don't go to church? We've got to educate it. A whole bunch of things. Like, it's the most boring hour of my week. I feel worse when I go than when I don't go. The guy at the front sweats a lot and puts his finger in my face and tells me how bad I am, and those kinds of things, right? But the number one reason that people gave us why they didn't go to church is the church makes no difference in our community. We wouldn't care if it's here or not. They don't make a difference. They don't invest in us. In fact, it seems right to them. They do bake sales and garage sales and those kinds of things, and they take the money from the community to send their kids to camp. And it seems right to them. That's what they do. And we were so shaken with that, because that's not what we expected. And we said, Jesus, if this church ever ceases to exist, may the community, wherever you place us, may they miss you and your influence, because the church is meant to be your representation on earth. And Jesus, when you were here, you were interesting, and you were humorous, and you had authority in the things that you said, and you healed people, and you took notice and interest in desperate women who no one else would take care of, and hurting and lost and abandoned people, and that's just what you did. No wonder people flocked to you. That's what they did. And so we said, that's the kind of community we want to be. Some 12 years ago or so, we purchased a piece of land that we're on right now, and we were really serious about creating some kind of a space in our community that the community would see as their own building. And so after we purchased the property, I spent a half hour with every civic leader who would give me half an hour of their time. And I went to them and I said, hey, we want to build something for the community that the community would see as their own building. We'll pay for it. We'll pay to maintain it. We'll manage it. We'll probably be the primary tenant, but we want to build something for our community that's a gift to our community, that would be a place where hurting people would naturally come, because that seems to be a place I can get some help. Lost people would come to see if anybody would find them. And so we were told, if you're serious about it, don't build an athletic kind of facility. There's lots of those opportunities in our community. Don't build a academic facility. There's lots of those in our community. But what our community doesn't have is a place for people to express their artistic interests. Every time there's a downturn in the economy, schools drop their arts programs, and the mom and pop kind of art places, they don't keep going, and so to do that. So we hired an architect, sent him to the Arizona Broadway Theater, and said, we want to build something like that. As we planned for the master plan of this, we decided what we would build is a performing arts center, which is really a well, by the way. It's like the well that Jesus met a woman at. Came for water, right? And walked away with living water. Our hope was this: well, what if we do art programs for kids and students and families, and they come and they're taught how to dance and how to sing and how to do sign language and technical arts and all those artistic expressions, but they're taught by teachers who love Jesus more than they love their art. And what if they would come for a dance class and encounter Jesus through a dance teacher who loves them, takes interest in them, cares about their lives? Is there a chance they would see Jesus through that? And so that's what we designed and we're working at, and why we have a Center for the Arts, because we want to have people come to our campus for what they want and need, walk away, come looking for art water, and walk away with living art water. There's a coffee shop right over here. It's not a church coffee shop. It's called The Well. Do you know why it's called The Well? Because in our culture, you know what the equivalent of water is? Coffee. It is. And so it's our hope that we can create an atmosphere, like a safe place where people from our community can come. And they can come for coffee and walk away with living coffee. That's what that's about. The stories that I could tell you of what Jesus is doing, sometimes I think all it takes is some people who love their community, love the people who live next to them. Just love them. Love the people they work next to. Love the people they do sports with and fitness stuff with and work next to. Just love them. Take notice of who they are and then take interest in their lives. And Jesus does the rest. That doesn't happen very much in our world. We say this around here often. You do not live where you live, work where you work, play where you play, go to school where you go to school because the house was the right deal. Had 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a garage. The fitness club had Pilates on Friday at 6 a.m, and that worked for you. The place I work, I got a degree and I really want to use my degree. The place, no. You live where you live, you work where you work, you play where you play, you go to school where you go to school because you are an agent of Jesus' love there. He put you there to live out His love in your life and then through your life, other people. This was His grand plan, His grand conspiracy. So that's why we say again, our mission is do all of life with Jesus. That's where you start. Do you know what happens when you do all of life with Him, when you walk through difficult times, trying times, good times, celebrating times, and you just are in that place of Jesus, you're in this all. I wake up in the morning and I give myself to you this day and you live through me this whole day. Guess what happens? The longer you spend, the more time you spend with Jesus. You actually start to think like Him. And you see neighbors through the way He sees them. You see colleagues at work the way He sees them. You see fellow students the way He sees them. And then you spend enough time with Him, you start to love them like He loves them. And then you start to do the things that He did, where you take risk and you just involve yourself in their life because you are you're the agent for the gospel of Jesus Christ, that He came into this world, the good news for you and me. The stories I could tell you of what Jesus is doing on this campus that you just don't, till you live it, you don't appreciate it. I think of one example just 5 months ago or so. I was here one evening doing some stuff with a group that were doing some things on campus, and somebody walked through the plaza area with his 2 dogs. And I said, "Hey, good evening." And he wished that back to me, and he said, "Hey, do you work here?" And I went, "Yeah, I kind of hang out here every once in a while." He goes, "I want to tell you something." He said, "I live just over here, and I'll never come to your church. Like, I'm not a religious guy. I'm not even sure God exists, to tell you the truth. But that coffee shop, it's like Cheers or Central Perk to me. In the early days of this pandemic, it's been my sanctuary. I don't know what's going on over there, but there's something really unique about the atmosphere of what's happening there." Now, is that anybody doing that? No. We have a teacher that, Genevieve, I just love to say her name, Genevieve. So, Genevieve, there you have it. She moved here from Philadelphia, where she has quite the credentials in her particular artistic discipline. And she was telling Kathy, our director, that finally in her life she has a place where she can lead with her faith. She can lead with her walk with Jesus. She couldn't do that in the places where she expressed that art form before, but here she's able to have dance students, teach them at a really high level, and have conversations about the Creator who gave them the ability to dance. Our technical arts guy, robotics guy, does a great job, Eric. Had a student, and this guy leads with his faith. He prays with his students when that's appropriate. And one day, one of his students, he had asked the question, if there was something in their lives he didn't know about them. And one young student said, "Yeah, I'm a cancer survivor." And his mom afterwards said, I don't think he's ever told another living being about that. But there's something about the safety that you have created in that robotics class where geeky kids are allowed and they're honored, that he felt safe to be able to tell you his personal journey. It just happens over and over again, from our students to our kids area. This is the mission that Jesus has us on in this city, in this community. So I want to tell you again, okay? We want to help people increasingly do all of life with him, so that we increasingly think like him, so we increasingly are mistaken for him, and to leverage this well for the fame of his great name, for the furtherance of the gospel message, which is the only thing that still rescues, saves, and redeems people. There's no other answer. It's this. And this is what we get to bring to our community. Now, Jesus, would you continue to do that in us and through us for your fame, for your glory, for your reputation? You took such a huge risk when you came into this world. You took notice of our condition, and then you took interest. And what a price you paid for that interest. What a captivating truth it is that you've entered our world to rescue, redeem us, make us whole, make us new. For your gift of grace and salvation and redemption and renewal. For us letting us be part of the great conspiracy on the face of this earth to reach every soul for you and to watch them become followers of yours. Thanks for letting us be part of it. We want to be faithful to it, Jesus. We want to represent you well. And we want to see our city won for your great name. And it's in your great name we pray this with thanksgiving. Amen.